Section 17 of The Diary of a Russian Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Florence Short. The Diary of a Russian Lady by Barbara Doukhovsky. Erzeroum. It is all cheery, homelike, and delightful out here. After my lonely life in Alexandropol and Kars, I began to take an interest in all my surroundings once more. When I waked up next morning, my first thought was, can it be true, or is it only a dream that I have my husband to myself? And I almost cried for joy when I was quite sure it was true. March 16th. Life in Erzeroum is an Elysium after my lonely life in Alexandropol and Kars. I am in such a radiant mood that I think everything I see is perfect. I have nothing left to wish for and am able to allow myself the luxury of a piano, a lovely saddle horse, and all sorts of nice things. Our house is one of the biggest in Erzeroum. It looks palatial after my lodgings in Alexandropol and Kars. From the top of our terrace roof one can see the whole town from a bird's-eye view, with its 66 minarets rising to the sky, its imposing citadels, and floating flags over different consulates. In the far distance there is the encircling chain of the Palantek Mountains with glittering snow peaks. The houses are low, with balustrades round them like those in biblical pictures. There are about 15,000 inhabitants in Erzeroum. The majority are Turks, then come Greeks and Armenians. After sunset the town looks gloomy. Only soldiers can be seen in the streets. As for the population, it is represented only by a multitude of errant dogs, the usual street sweepers of Turkish towns. I hear every evening the voices of the muezzin, Turkish priests, calling to prayer, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. God is great. I had a nightmare last night, and with a loud scream I woke up. I dreamt that Sergey was ordered to the war and clung to him, fearing to be parted again. Sergey held me close to him and kissed away my tears, assuring me that nothing and nobody could part us now, and that I shall be with him always, night and day. He succeeded at length in calming my fears. I felt safe again under his wing and fell peacefully asleep. March 17th. My arrival caused the greatest excitement among the Christian inhabitants of Erzeroum. They are all singing my praises for having come out here by those shocking roads, and they say that I certainly deserve a medal as a reward for my bravery. Was it curiosity to see a European woman, or was it a desire to show devotedness to the Russians? Perhaps both reasons together made visitors overflow our drawing-room. All the bigwigs of the town came to pay their respects to me. Today, for instance, I received the family of George Effendi, one of the richest Greek merchants of Erzeroum. His wife wore a splendid silk dress interwoven with gold and silver, and a small velvet cap adorned with gold spangles and tassels. Her daughter-in-law, a woman of 14, of childish stature and appearance, was obliged to keep the most absolute silence in her presence, whilst her own daughter chatted in very bad French all the while. After them came the family of Antoine Effendi Shebanian, the most noted Armenian inhabitant of the town, who had come to present his respects to me the day before. The native Christian women, being under the domination of Turkish rule, find themselves here in such a state of degradation that their husbands consider it unsuitable to appear with them anywhere. Antoine Effendi speaks very good English for a foreigner. He has been a correspondent of the Times during the Russo-Turkish War. Other guests came in quick succession, amongst them the French consul, Monsieur Gilbert, with his wife, a charming young woman, so bright and winsome. Madame Gilbert seems very friendly. She has put her books and music at my disposal. We propose to see each other often, and to take long walks together. During the Gilberts' visit, an old pasha came in. That ancient fanatic, more than 80 years of age, didn't venture to look into my face, but kept his eyes fixed chastely on the carpet, murmuring sotto voce something I didn't understand. Madame Gilbert, who speaks Turkish, explained that the aged Mussulman was making Oriental compliments to me. Just before dinner, an Australian doctor came in, holding a stick and a Scotch cap in his hand. That young physician is summoned away to Constantinople and has come to ask Sergey for a passport. He is the son of a rich cattle breeder residing in Melbourne. I saw on his arm a white band with a red crescent and the letters S.H.S. on it, indicating that he belonged to the Stafford House Society. There is a great number of European doctors attending the Turks in Erzeroum. Nearly all the nations have sent their contingents of medical men. These Christians in the Turkish service produce rather a painful impression on me. A telegraphic office is just opened. No telegram can be sent without my husband's permission as censor. Heaps of telegraphic dispatches are brought to him every day. The first telegram was sent by Sergey to Ismail Pasha, the former governor of Erzeroum, in which he congratulated the Turkish warrior on the inauguration of the telegraph. March 18th. Today my husband gave a grand dinner in honor of a dozen officers belonging to the Turkish army who happen to be staying here at present. A military band announced the arrival of our Turkish guests by a loud march. The dinner was a very gay and long one, consisting of 12 courses. Our guests, not being fanatics, did ample honor to the champagne. I sat opposite Sergey, between Hussein Pasha and Daniel Bek, a smart young officer of the Turkish staff, aide-de-camp to the celebrated Mukhtar Pasha. This young Turk wore his fez jauntily on one side, and looked quite European, having been educated in Paris. He has been military attaché at the Turkish embassy at St. Petersburg for 3 years, and speaks perfect French and Russian. Daniel Beck surveyed me with appraising eyes and said himself to be charming to me all through the meal. I found him most amusing, and was soon chatting away to him as if I had known him for years. Hussein Pasha teased me all through dinner by insinuating that his subordinate was paying court to me too openly. March 19th. It is Sunday today. We have attended Mass at the Greek Cathedral. Though it is situated far away from the center of town, we proceeded thither on foot, escorted by Hamad Bey, an officer attached to the person of my husband, a dragoman, a Turkish zapti, and about a dozen Cossacks. The attitude of the Armenian inhabitants that we met on our way was most cordial and sympathetic towards us. But the Mussulmans showed open hostility by their glances full of hatred that they cast upon us. By these glances it was easy to distinguish the Turks from the Armenians, notwithstanding the similitude of their garments. The Greek cathedral was erected in the honor of St. George the Conqueror. There is a throne in the middle for the archbishop, who said Mass, arrayed in his sacerdotal vestments. He wore on his head an immense mitre adorned with the Byzantine eagle. The prayers were sung in Greek with a very nasal sound. Our Russian officers have made a present to this church of the image of St. George with the following dedication: in commemoration of the sojourn of the Russian army in Erzeroum in the year 1878. We didn't remain till the end of the service, for on that same morning a requiem was sung in the Armenian cathedral for the repose of the soul of General Shelkov-Dakov, my husband's predecessor. I aroused much curiosity and attention at church, where an enormous congregation had gathered. The cathedral appeared very imposing with all the wax lights and chandeliers ablaze, and the Metropolitan looked magnificent, clad in a robe that was stiff with gold embroideries. About 100 chanters in black and red surplices sang melodious hymns. From time to time, choristers shook big silver discs with much noise. The loud voice of the Metropolitan was suddenly drowned by a deafening uproar above in the choirs. A loud squabble arose among the Armenian women, who protested loudly at seeing me down in the nave of the church, where they were not allowed to penetrate. As soon as the service was over, the Metropolitan delivered a long sermon of which we couldn't make out a word. It proved to be an ovation in favor of the Russians, as well as a demonstration against the Turks. I fear that he will have to pay dearly for his eloquence as soon as we leave Erzeroum. After service, the Metropolitan invited us to have a cup of tea. During our visit, Sergei asked him the reason of the women's screams in the choirs, and he explained to us that it was quite natural that the liberty given to European women had created an animosity between these recluses, who protested against it in that noisy way. We had spent the afternoon in paying calls in a victoria belonging to General Hyman, the only carriage in all Erzeroum. After our visit to Madame Gilbert, we went to George Effendi, where we were received with effusive cordiality. As soon as we were seated on a low divan, Turkish coffee without sugar and different sorts of preserves were served to us. Oriental politeness required us to take a very small quantity of jam and to drink a whole glass of water after it. When we got up to say good-bye, George Effendi threw upon my shoulder a shawl of great price that I had just admired, and his daughter undid her beautiful necklace of heavy coins and clasped it round my neck. Of course I refused both presents outright, but I was told afterwards that it was an Oriental custom to offer as a present the object just praised. I will certainly abstain from admiring anything in the future, because the natives say directly, "It is yours, take it," and that is very embarrassing. When we got home we found an old Turk at our door who held a paper in his hand. He was robbed the previous night and came to complain to my husband. I had hardly time to take off my hat when 3 French Sisters of Mercy were announced. After that came the Persian consul, accompanied by his interpreter. The consul is a honey-tongued personage who made graceful speeches to me. Flattering phrases came so readily to his lips, and I did not particularly like him. March 20th. My riding habit of dark blue cloth and a jacket made after the style of a Turkish uniform have just been brought to me. When I appeared for the first time in that costume, Hamid Bey saluted me in military fashion, because the sleeves of my habit were made with gold embroideries like those of a pasha. I spent much of my time in the saddle, accompanied by my husband in a large suite. Such freedom given to the young Giaour is incomprehensible to the inhabitants of Erzeroum, who find it very improper. I have stirred up a stormy discussion in many Christian families. Newly married women begin to protest against the ancient order of things, and the old ones, on the contrary, faithful to the ancient traditions, show themselves indignant against European liberal customs. The Persian consul has sent me this morning a large basket of fresh oranges and lemons, which came from Trebizond, and Erzeroum is still buried in snow. I had another present today, a splendid roasted turkey cock sent to me by the wife of the president of the Turkish Municipal Council, who warned me of her visit so as to be quite certain of meeting no man in our house. This evening about 20 doctors of Russian, English, and Turkish nationalities came to debate upon the indifferent sanitary conditions of the town. During this winter about 1,500 Russian soldiers have been buried here. Their graves were of such small depth that when the melting of the snow had begun, many tombs were exposed to view, and it was necessary to fill them up once more. Dr. Remmert, the chief physician of the Army of the Caucasus, sent up to Erzeroum in order to inspect the military hospitals, was agreeably surprised to see the town so clean and so well arranged. The innumerable canals have been cleaned out and the slaughter-houses banished from the town. The heaps of snow of more than 3 meters in height that encumbered the streets are completely cleared away. The inhabitants, seeing the Russian workmen occupied with the improvements of the general state of the health of their own town, say, "How funny these Russians are to spend so much money for an affair that a month later nature would do for nothing." In returning from our ride this morning, we saw a group of mullahs assembled before our house. They had come to complain against the Russian police that had arrived to take an inventory of all their goods, and had begun to make an account of their wives and cattle. It proved to be the Sanitary Commission who were obtaining necessary information. My husband took immediate measures to calm the population. The Armenian Catholic Archbishop Melchizedek called before dinner. Though he is suavity itself, there is something about him which gives me a feeling of distrust. He pretends to be very happy that the Russians still occupy Erzeroum, and dreads our departure, fearing cruel treatment from the Turks toward the Christian population. March 21st. My husband introduced an American clergyman to me this morning, who is working as a missionary in Erzeroum. He has come to ask Sergei to give him a large supply of bread and money, but Sergei said he could give him but a small sum. The Russian government has, in fact, assigned a monthly subsidy for the poor population of Erzeroum, not only for the Protestants, but for all the indigent, independent of their religion or nationality. Later on came Ibrahim Bey, one of the dignitaries of the town of Kanis, who had to proceed further on to Erzincan, the headquarters of Ismail Pasha. This Turk kissed the lappets of my husband's coat slavishly, and drew backwards towards the door, putting his hand to his forehead and heart. As an example of Turkish barbarism, I shall note an exploit that he related to Sergei, and of which he boasted, a truly disgusting story. At Kanis, some Kurds dug up the corpse of a Russian soldier and stripped him of his clothes and boots. As a punishment for their sacrilegious misdeed, Ibrahim Pasha obliged the Kurds to eat these boots, chopped up into small bits. March 25th. On account of ill health, General Loris Melikov, by his own request, was released from the command of the main army, which was given over to General Hyman. The contents of the political telegrams received today are rather alarming. England decidedly plots a war afresh, and a rumor of approaching breaking of peace has spread in the town. We must be prepared that the Turks will assail us at any moment. This morning a soldier of the light infantry belonging to the Malakani sect, desiring to embrace the Orthodox religion, came to beg me to stand godmother to him. This soldier made a vow to be baptized if he escaped war safely. He has been in all the fights without having received the slightest wound, and thinks it proper now to fulfill his promise. I of course consented willingly. March 26th. The baptism of the Malakan soldier took place today in the Armenian cathedral, which was so crowded that the cavasses had to clear a way for us to pass. The metropolitan officiated in Greek and addressed himself continually to me in that language. As I couldn't understand a word, I didn't know how to answer and what to do, and was very comic, I am sure, in repeating aloud the Greek phrases that he dictated to me. Mr. Popov, an officer of the light infantry, acted as godfather. Our godson had to be completely undressed, which took place behind a screen, and then brought in to us covered only with a white sheet. I didn't know where to cast my eyes whilst he was being dipped in the font, which was no other than the big soup boiler of the brigade to which our godson belonged. I did not dare to glance at Sergei, and pressed my lips together, trying not to shake with laughter, and drew a breath of profound relief when I realized that the ceremony of baptism was over. From church we went to visit the bride of Agashi, our Armenian interpreter. The walls of her sitting room were all hung up with her drawings, amongst which we saw the portrait of our emperor, painted by our hostess in the space of 2 days, during the time when the Christian inhabitants of Erzeroum expected their town to be invaded by the Russians. Dreading to see our soldiers enter their homes by force in order to plunder them, they put out big wooden crosses before their houses in the hope of mollifying the hearts of our soldiers, trusting to escape thus from the general fate. Our hostess told us candidly that she concealed that picture when the Turkish officials visited her house, but during our visit the portrait of His Majesty occupied the place of honor. Today my husband has ordered Şevket Bey, one of the oldest members of the Ottoman officers left in Erzeroum, to fire a cannon from the citadel at 12 o'clock precisely, employing for that purpose a Turkish gun and Turkish powder. 10 of our soldiers have been appointed for that special service by Sergei. Şevket Bey was obliged to submit, swallowing his wrath. He took it with outward meekness, whilst his eyes gave a flash, and answered humbly, "Peki, I'll obey you." Amongst the Turkish telegrams that my husband received this morning, there was one to Ismail Pasha, with a complaint against Sergei for having forbidden the Ottoman flag to be hoisted over the tower of the principal citadel of Erzeroum. In answer to this telegram, Ismail Pasha gave orders that every command given by the Russian authorities should be strictly executed. Among the representatives of the different churches here, it is only the Mussulman Mufti who has not presented himself to my husband. Yesterday evening a group of Turkish inhabitants came to ask permission to hoist their flag on Fridays, but Sergei told them that they interfered with things that didn't concern them, and that it was their Mufti who had to solicit this permission. The Mufti arrived today accompanied by a great number of white-bearded and white-turbaned imams, Mohammedan priests, dressed in long furred robes. This time my husband has given them the permission to hoist their standard on Fridays, and has been warmly thanked for it. We had two interesting guests at dinner today. A young Persian prince, nephew of the Shah, who serves as dragoon officer in the Russian army, and is attached to the police master of Erzeroum for the present, and Daniel Effendi, a Turkish bureaucrat, who was sent to Constantinople last year as member of the new Turkish parliament. After dinner, as we sipped our coffee on the roof terrace, a geisha with a rather scattered expression came up to Sergei and led him away, whispering something into his ear. Later on I was informed that there had just been an earthquake, and as the second shock is generally stronger than the first one, a geisha came to advise my husband to make us all come out into the street. Some years before there had been such a terrible earthquake in Erzeroum that the inhabitants were forced to camp out in the open air for a whole month. After today's earthquake, one of the walls of the citadel has partly fallen down, and a great number of houses have cracked. It's very strange that I haven't felt anything at all, not the slightest shock. In order to prevent accidents in Erzeroum, where earthquakes are frequent, big beams are put into the masonries of nearly all the buildings. Two great shocks and some slight ones have succeeded each other during the night, and this time I felt them. It's my first experience of an earthquake, and my last one, I hope. March 28th. The weather being comparatively fine, we have taken a long walk this afternoon in the direction of Tap Dagh, a beautiful valley situated at the foot of a high mountain, from whence one discovers the source of the Euphrates, the famous biblical river. Behind the Tap Dagh, according to Armenian traditions, Adam's paradise was situated, with the two rivers mentioned in the descriptions of the Elysium. This is where fate has brought me. The scenery is said to be exquisite, the vegetation luxurious. The future is already brightened. The terms of the Treaty of Peace have finally been signed at San Sebastiano on the 1st of February. This glorious piece of news has reached us only today in this out-of-the-world place. April 1st. Mr. Kamsarakan, our prefect of the police, is a very jolly fellow, fond of playing jokes on his friends. Today, for instance, he has invited to dinner all his acquaintances belonging to the Russian colony whom he met in the street, promising them a splendid Russian cabbage pie. His guests rejoiced beforehand at the thought of partaking of that famous national dish, but as they began to arrive there was no sign whatever of any preparations for dinner, and Kamsarakan's servant announced that his master was out, and would probably not dine at home today. The guests' countenances expressed the blankest dismay. Being far from their fatherland, no one had remembered that the 1st of April was the day of traditional mystifications. As for Kamsarakan, he went at the same time to Mr. Aritzev's, one of his invited guests, and asked the servant to give him something to eat. He devoured all the supper, and when poor Aritzev returned home, dismissed from Kamsarakan's house, he found himself deprived both of his dinner and his supper. April 2nd. The Catholics celebrate today their Palm Sunday. We went to their cathedral, where Capuchin monks in brown garments, wearing a cord instead of a girdle, officiated. After Mass we visited the school directed by the French Sisters of Mercy. The Turks had shown themselves very uncivil to these sisters when they arrived at Erzeroum, but they got accustomed to them afterwards, and begin now to esteem the good sisters for their attendance on the sick and wounded. April 4th. Our Tartar servant Husnuddin has arrived from Kars. He has made that journey in 16 days, being upset several times. Husnuddin has brought me different indispensable articles. Until now my wardrobe was in a shocking condition. A small portmanteau contained all my belongings. We walked down to the ramparts this afternoon with the Gilberts, and rambled over the old fort, surrounded by high massive walls, through the embrasures of which cannons are to be seen. During all these 8 years of their sojourn in Erzeroum, the Gilberts are entering this citadel for the first time. It had been terra prohibita to all strangers up till now. Pushing forward, we climbed up a high tower by a narrow winding staircase. My long habit was dreadfully in the way, and I stumbled over it continually. The citadel is now occupied by the Russian regiment of Baku, and 3 or 4 scores of Turkish soldiers entrusted to watch over the warehouse, who presented arms to my husband. There is a great bond of sympathy between these Osmanlis and our soldiers. Though not one of them can speak a word of Turkish, they explain themselves quite easily in a highly fantastic language of their own. Maksud Effendi, the chief of this small Turkish detachment, bewitched us by his amiability and led us to admire the edifice of Chifket Minaret, a beautiful Arabian building of the 9th century, with 2 formidable pillars of the Byzantine style at the entrance. According to what the Armenians say, a saint of their nationality reposes in that minaret, but the Mussulmans pretend that it is the burial place of one of their most celebrated imams. For the moment, this mausoleum, as well as the innermost recesses of their edifice, are encumbered with guns, bombs, shells, and other objects of but little religious character. April 6th. The officers of the Rifle Battalion invited us to come and take tea in their camp. At our approach a military band struck up a march. The musicians were surrounded by a red-fezzed mob, and the natives, generally lank and thin, looked contemptible little pieces of humanity beside our tall, portly soldiers. We were invited to dismount and entered a great tent where we sat down at a long table. Our hosts, who were awfully nice to us, proposed a little refreshment and drank our health. April 7th. Our landlord, an Italian chemist named Ricci, has transformed himself into a famous physician here. His daughters go to the French school and wear tcharchis when they start out of doors. Eleonora, the eldest Señorita Ricci, came in this afternoon to announce to me the visit of the wife of the president of the town council. I ran to the window and saw an araba, a Turkish chariot, covered inside with red cloth, approaching our house. The araba was drawn by a pair of beautiful white bullocks. A red-fezzed boy of about 12 was following behind, mounted on a tiny pony, and 2 male servants were running on each side of the vehicle. When the carriage stopped at our door, 3 women, wrapped up in black veils, stepped out of the chariot and entered our drawing-room. The president's wife, an outrageously painted young woman, was followed by her little son and 2 female slaves, a white one and a negress. Turkish ladies of fashion never go out without their attendants. The negress in her scarlet vestment with large printed black flowers reminded me of Azucena, the troubadour's mother. She has been brought over from Istanbul, where her mother still resides in the Sultan's harem. This black Venus was bought by the president's wife for the sum of 1,000 francs. Through Eleonora as interpreter, I was able to carry on a conversation with my Turkish guests, in which harem life was the only topic. The Mussulman women are incapable of seeing anything beyond it. Their souls are asleep. They are dull and unimaginative, without any keen interests, and deplorably ignorant. Most of them never turn the leaves of a book or trace a word upon paper. The president's wife told me that she was surnamed Blue Hannum on account of her blue eyes. She paid me a lot of compliments and appeared very astonished that my husband allowed me to associate with men and that he permitted me to appear before them unveiled. She plagued me with childish questions about my sentiments towards my husband, and in her turn she related to me the sensations that she experienced at the time when her husband had 2 wives. Both consorts cried bitterly each night when their pasha gave his preference to the rival spouse. She told me with a smile of satisfaction that her rival died a few years ago, leaving her an undivided sovereignty over her husband. Harem slavery begins at the age of 12. Till then Turkish girls are as free as European children. But on her 12th birthday, the girl becomes a woman. She adopts the Tcharchev and is condemned to see the world darkly through a veil. Henceforth she is a prisoner in the harem. The negro slave proposed a nigger boy to me, when suddenly the idea struck her that I should wish to appropriate her little son, and she hastened to warn me that he was a mulatto and not a thoroughbred nigger. She told me I could order one from Diyarbakir, and that he wouldn't cost more than 500 francs, and added that I could also procure for myself from that same place a splendid young negress who could speak several languages. But she warned me charitably that these learned negresses were often unprincipled and dangerous to keep, on account of their propensity to seduce the master of the house. I replied laughingly that in that case I should certainly prefer to buy a nigger boy. When coffee was brought in, the negress and the slave sat down on their heels upon the floor to sip it. They daren't do it otherwise in the presence of their mistress. After a while the negress asked permission to go and smoke in the corridor. It was only a pretext to have a peep at Sergei and his aide-de-camp, who were just then in the next room. In leaving our house, the president's wife, who had severely remonstrated with the negress for her improper curiosity, revealed to her by her little son, could not resist the temptation of stealing a glance at the imprisoned gentleman through the chink of the door. She invited me to come and see her soon, promising to show me the best dancing girls, Bayadères, in Erzeroum. Now, to turn to the other side of the medal, I must say that during our stay at Erzeroum, our roses weren't entirely without thorns. The typhus fever continued to rage, and mowed down whole ranks of our soldiers. Every day there were new victims. The Russian cemetery is quite full now, and we are obliged to bury our soldiers in a common grave. Nearly every morning I see sinister wagons carrying away the unfortunate victims of this dreadful epidemic to their last dwelling place. I shudder when I think of it. We are warned that a fanatic society under the name of Avengers, Christian haters, is newly organized, and that we run great risks during our rides through the bazaars and Turkish quarters. April 8th. Today we revisited the camp of the light infantry, desiring to see my godson, the newly converted Malakani soldier, who, by the way, is several years older than his godmother. I was horrified to hear that he had just been sent to the hospital. Presently, amongst our soldiers, the comparatively healthy ones are only those who have recovered already from the typhus fever. It is pitiful to see their pale and meagre faces. Mr. Popov told me that the sight of a Russian woman would help them to forget, for a moment at least, that they find themselves in a strange and hostile land, so far away from their native country. April 12th. Today is Maundy Thursday. The Catholic Archbishop has invited us to assist at the ceremony of the washing of the feet of 12 little boys belonging to the best Armenian families of Erzeroum. These children, dressed in long white garments and wearing crowns of flowers on their heads, had taken their seats on a long bench covered with red cloth. After having each one bared the right foot, one of the priests poured some water into a golden dish, and the archbishop, in rich sacerdotal vestments, knelt before each of them on one knee, took the bared foot, washed it, and dried it with a towel. After this he offered each child a lighted wax taper and a box of bonbons tied with a green ribbon. In the evening a service was held in the dwelling of General Hyman, who was in Kars at the present moment, dangerously ill. The reading aloud of the 12 evangelists by our Russian priest in this foreign land to a mass of Russian officers, each holding a wax light, produced a great impression upon me. After the second evangelist, an officer came into the room, a telegram in his hand, and gave it over to my husband, who perused the dispatch with an air of consternation. And whilst it passed from hand to hand, I noticed the troubled expression of the faces about me. This telegram announced the decease of General Hyman, carried off in 5 days by the typhus. Is then the prediction of one of our friends going to be realized? He said that we should all die here, and that none of us should see his native land again. The turn of each one is the only thing unknown to us. After the reading of the 12 evangelists, a requiem was sung for the peace of the soul of General Hyman. April 13th. The Russian colony at Erzeroum decided to celebrate the Easter night ceremony with great pomp, a rather difficult thing to do in this Mussulman country. An attempt was made to illuminate the streets leading to the Greek cathedral, but the inhabitants hadn't the slightest idea how to do it, and it was our house only which was lighted with lanterns taken from mosques. When my husband had put on his uniform and red ribbon, we proceeded to church on horseback in complete obscurity, with a dozen Cossacks and Zaptists to protect us. It is very sad to feel oneself in a Mussulman country on this great Christian feast. Nothing recalls to mind the customary animation of that holy night. The streets are so dark and silent. On approaching the cathedral, we saw a detachment of Russian soldiers standing under arms. The church was illuminated as giorno and filled with officers, soldiers, and Christian inhabitants. The latter take off their fezzes now in church, which they didn't dare to do before the entry of the Russians into Erzeroum. In a corner of the cathedral lay heaps of painted eggs and Easter cakes brought by our soldiers to be blessed. Cannons were fired. The first shot was at midnight precisely. After Mass, my husband invited all the Russian colony to supper. Our guests left us only at 5 o'clock in the morning. April 14th. On waking this morning, I heard men's voices singing in chorus, "Christ is risen." It was a group of Cossacks who had come to congratulate us with Easter Sunday. Later on, from 10 o'clock, visitors of different nationalities continued to arrive until dinner time. It is reported that the Turks circulate exaggerated rumors about the pitiful state of our troops and say that the moment for revenge against the Christians has come. What troublesome times we are living through, good God! The Mussulmans had the custom of firing guns through the whole night during the eclipses of the moon, but my husband has forbidden this now in order not to frighten the Christians. April 17th. It is the birthday of our emperor today. After a Te Deum in the Greek cathedral, there was a great review of our troops on the square. 4 military bands executed our national hymn, whilst our soldiers acclaimed their sovereign enthusiastically. The square was crowded with onlookers. Erzeroum caught the drift of a dialogue between an Armenian and a Turk. The Turk announced, pointing to the citadel from whence discharges were heard, "The Russians are unable," said he, "to frighten us with their cannon shots. One sees directly that these cannons are not Turkish ones, for they make too little noise." "You are much mistaken," broke in the Armenian. "They are precisely Turkish cannons, and it is Maksud Effendi who has procured the gunpowder." Ah, now I see the reason why we are able to hear these cannon shots, for if they were Russian guns, they would not be heard at all from the citadel, concluded the Osmanli, not a bit disconcerted. In the afternoon, the members of the town council came in to congratulate my husband on the occasion of today's solemnity. Their president, Mohammed Ali Bey, was accompanied by a group of white-turbaned mullahs. Sergei made a long speech to them, translated by Agashi. He thanked them for their activity, for the order that they maintained in the town, and promised them to express to Ismail Pasha his gratitude for having chosen such worthy members for his municipal council. He ended his speech by telling them that the Russians occupied Erzeroum by the will of God, and it was the duty of all the inhabitants to submit to their destiny and to strictly obey our authorities. My husband made a rich present to Ali Effendi in the name of the Russian government. He gave him a beautiful gold snuff-box adorned with diamonds, which cost 4,000 francs. I didn't go out today, having to superintend the preparations for the official dinner that Sergei gave to the Russian and Turkish authorities. The table was richly decorated with flowers and fruits brought from Tartum, where they are admirably preserved. Last year's pears are still quite fresh. At about 6 o'clock, the musicians mounted on to the roof of the opposite house by a ladder against the wall, one after another. Street lads climbed up after them in such numbers that one was obliged to turn them out for fear of the roof falling in. Another band was placed in the street just under our balcony. From my window I saw the Persian consul approaching on his beautiful white Arab. In a few moments our drawing-room was full of guests. My husband placed himself at the center of the table, having on one side the Metropolitan and on the other the Armenian Archbishop. I was sitting opposite. The dinner was very animated. Much champagne was drunk. Meksoud Effendi consumed this stimulating beverage more than anyone. He embraced his neighbor, Prince Chechavadze, and exclaimed in a transport of tenderness, "If war had continued, I would have killed you, perhaps, but now I kiss you with all my heart." My husband gave the first toast and drank to the health of our emperor. Everybody stood up crying, "Hurrah!" After that Sergei exclaimed, "I drink to the duration of peace between Russia and the friendly powers, France, Turkey, and Persia, as well as to the health of their representatives here present." The Metropolitan pronounced a long discourse in Armenian that Agashi translated to us. He said that the Emperor of Russia had always been regarded with deep love and respect by the whole Christian population of Asia, and that he consequently proposed a toast to the health of our monarch in the name of all the Armenians. Ali Effendi, taking offense, proposed to drink the health of our emperor in the name of all the Asiatic nationalities, without distinction of religion, as he could not admit any difference between them. The Metropolitan, wishing to expiate his awkwardness, held up his glass to Ali Effendi, but the offended Osmanli feigned not to notice it, and removed his glass. Never will the Koran and the Gospel evidently live in peace in Asia. Mr. Gilbert, in his turn, after having spoken of the sympathy that existed between France and Russia, exclaimed, "Long live Russia!" And my husband replied immediately, "Long live France!" The Catholic Archbishop said something very eloquent, but rather incomprehensible. The last toast was drunk by Sergei to the prosperity of Erzeroum, whatever fate should befall it. After dinner we went out on the balcony and listened to the different potpourris on Russian national airs executed by our military bands. At our appearance hundreds of voices exclaimed, "Long live the Emperor of Russia!" It was night when the musicians returned to their camp, playing marches all the time. They were followed by a throng of street boys who carried their cymbals and their rolls of music. April 18th. On waking this morning I saw the street covered with snow, which continued to fall in big flakes. And it is spring in Russia now. Country, people, climate, everything is so gloomy out here. In the afternoon I went on horseback to return my visit to the wife of the president of the town council. Madame Gilbert followed, with Helena in a cart procured by our ambulance people. Eleonora had entreated her father to allow her to accompany us, but he refused outright, saying that if the question was of visiting an Armenian or Greek family, he would have willingly given his consent, but he would certainly never allow his daughter to enter a Turkish harem. The president's wife met us at the entrance door and led us into her private apartments, furnished in Turkish style with low sofas all round the walls, on which sat, cross-legged, 5 baradires. dressed in green and pink robes. Their faces were painted white and red, and their nails dyed with henna juice. After a slight collation, which consisted of coffee and different sorts of preserves, served in silver vases, the bayadères began to dance, clinking castanets. 4 music girls sat on the floor and played the daira, a sort of cithern. Brandy and champagne were offered to the bayadères to put them in still more depraved spirits, and they began to dance unlike anything I have ever seen. The master of the house, who sat in the next room with a score of male friends, left his door ajar, and the sight of these men inflamed the dancing girls still more, and they took such liberties that I didn't dare to raise my eyes from the carpet. When the bayadères approached Helena, making indecent gestures, my poor old nurse pushed them back, her eyes flashing indignantly. Her speechless horror amused me enormously, and it was a mercy that from the place where I sat I hadn't Madame Gilbert to exchange glances with, or I couldn't have remained serious. Our hostess seemed astonished at Helena's repulse, and asked why she did it, and if it was contrary to her religion. Anyone who reads this will suppose that I am describing a house of ill fame, but on the contrary, it is one of the most respectable houses in Erzeroum, and all these enormities are of the exigencies of harem life. The little son of our hostess, aged 12, an awfully vicious brat, was incapable of concealing the ardor with which he was gazing upon the contortions of the bayadères. He hardly heard when he was spoken to. Dinner was served à la franca, but there were knives and forks for us only. Our hosts did very well without them, helping themselves with their fingers. The meal consisted of a score of meat and sweet dishes intermingled. I did not know what I was eating, but was compelled to taste everything. To refuse would be a great offence to our hostess, and I resigned myself to swallow all sorts of nasty things. Our hostess, according to the custom of the country, tasted every dish before it was served to her guests, in order to prove that it wasn't poisoned. During the meal the son of our hostess behaved abominably. He tyrannized over the poor little mulatto, the son of the negress slave, and was awfully rude to his mother, daring to call her in our presence Keopek, which means dog in Turkish. After dinner, a large copper basin was brought in to wash our hands, after which the dances were renewed. The face of one of the bayadères was completely veiled. I was told that this woman had formerly been a prostitute. She is married now, but all the same she is obliged to cover her face in remembrance of her bad life. When the time came to bid good-bye to our hostess, I wanted to give a baksheesh, a tip, to the dancing girls, but she objected to this and told me that I had far better invite them to come and dance in our house. I promised to do it one of these days. I could not possibly imagine that our hostess's son, the perverse little despot, could show himself such a gallant cavalier towards me. In parting he wanted absolutely to kiss me, and declared that at first he had detested the Russians, but now he had seen me he liked me so much that his most ardent wish was that the Russians would remain forever in Erzeroum. April 23rd. Today is the feast of the Zeppur Battalion. Their chief, Prince Tumanov, begged me to assist at their Te Deum performed on their camp, telling me that my presence would be a great treat to his officers and soldiers. I couldn't refuse his friendly invitation, and proceeded on horseback to the camp. When prayers were over, the officers invited me to partake of their repast, served in a big tent. After Prince Tumanov had drunk my health, I took my courage in both hands and gave a toast to the hospitality of our amiable hosts. An awful uproar arose. The officers called for 3 cheers for me, and the soldiers cried hurrah, throwing their caps in the air. A small bazaar was just opposite the tent, with nuts, plums, apples, and different sweetmeats. Sergei bought the whole contents and dealt them out to the soldiers. At 7 o'clock the Zappers gave a banquet in the apartments of the deceased General Hyman. I begged for Madame Gilbert to be invited to that dinner, so as not to be the only woman at that festival. Again numerous toasts were given. Dr. Rettlinger, a thorough Dorpat student, stood on a chair and gave a long discourse in praise of Erzeroum. When he had ended, Prince Tumanov exclaimed that he had forgotten to mention in his panegyrics the most important point of all, namely, that Paradise happened to be only a few miles off from here. Everybody laughed, for the neighbourhood of Paradise was not perceptible in Erzeroum, as we dabbled in the mud and snow close by this Paradise, whilst it was already springtime in Russia. When we got home I went directly to bed, and was just falling asleep when the sounds of a march playing under our windows awakened me. It proved to be a group of Zapper officers who had come to serenade me for having taken part at their festival. End of section 17.